Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Mary Amex with the Virginia Credit Union League. I'm the Director of Professional Development at the League. Thank you all for joining us today for the first session in our Shift Happens series. First, before we get started, I'd like to give a special shout out to our Marketing and Business Development Council for their assistance in putting this series together. We so appreciate you all and all the hard work that you do for us, so thanks so much. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Currently, all audio lines should be muted to control background noise. We will cover several polling questions throughout the presentation. You'll see these in your chat window. If you have a question, feel free to submit that via the chat icon feature on the dashboard. You can also unmute yourself if you've called in by pressing *6. Today, we are pleased to have Tammy Harvey with us. Tammy is the Director of Agile Continuous Improvement at CUNA Mutual Group. She has over 17 years of experience leading teams, driving continuous improvement, and organizational transformation. Tammy joined CUNA Mutual Group in 2007. Her accomplishments led her to expanded roles of business manager, operations manager, and transformation leader. Throughout her CUNA Mutual Group career, Tammy continues to achieve awards recognizing her commitment to driving business results. She received the Values in Practice Award for strongly embodying collaboration, one of CUNA Mutual Group's corporate values. She was recognized in Madison Magazine, which featured exceptional women as a leader transforming the organization while serving as a mentor, helping others advance their professional careers. Tammy graduated from Seton Hall University with a master's in business administration. She also holds a bachelor's degree in exercise and sports science. Tammy, I will turn it over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Mary. All right. You might have to mute yourself too, Mary.
Yep.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Again, my name is Tammy Harvey. I lead our Agile Continuous Improvement at CUNA Mutual Group. I'm really excited and passionate to talk to you today about agility and why this topic matters so much. It really is a key enabler to delivering our strategies in a time where the pace of change is just not slowing down. So I'm going to talk about how leveraging agility will help you meet uncertainty head on. And to start, I would like to ask you to please open up your chat and comment on this question. When you hear the word agility, what is one word that comes to your mind? So again, when you hear the word agility, what is one word that comes to your mind? And I'll share some of these responses out. I'm not sure if everyone can see these, Nicole, but I see movement, flexibility, being able to adapt, nimble, Barry Sanders, flexible, that's great. Thank you for sharing some of those responses. And Mary's going to help me advance. And so, see, having agility or being agile simply means you can adapt to change. And so in the industry, a lot of folks you'll hear associate agile to a methodology, a way of executing work. And you'll see a lot of terms around process, methodology, some of these terms that you see on this slide right now. And that's all correct. And that's one aspect in looking at agile. But if you advance, Mary, to the next, but in doing this, sometimes we found that we lose sight of some of the behaviors and the mindset and the values, enabling a culture that can really be agile. And so as an organization, we found it really critical to have all of these things. See, for us, being agile means we've had to look deeper in how we think, how we act, and how we execute and how we lead. And Mary, if you want to advance to the next. We started first with big A, Agile, the process, the methodology. And what we quickly learned was, well, that's great to start, to create a culture that's going to have, a different way of doing things. You need all of these things. It's really a change in your mindset. And we could probably have a whole discussion on this slide alone. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to interweave some of these concepts from agility in some things that we're all experiencing right now. And so if we advance, when you think about agility and why it's so critical, there's certain conditions where agility can thrive in. As many of you commented in the chat, while it's great to be able to respond to change, even better if we can anticipate that change. In an agile environment, it really empowers everyone to be an agent of change. Now more than ever, we're faced with rapidly changing conditions, complex problems, and just a whole lot of uncertainty of what's to come. And it's really requiring us all to think and adjust the way we work and how we serve our customers, our employees, now and into the future. And I'm going to share today some strategies that are really helping us and could potentially help you as you lean into this uncertainty. So the word uncertainty almost seems synonymous these days with our current environment. So if you want to advance, we're living in uncertainty right now, both personally, professionally. An analogy I've been using lately, it's like a marathon you didn't realize you signed up for and you forgot to train for. We've also have no idea how long this is going to last. And specifically, though, as it relates to COVID and the pandemic event itself, the economic impact, the reentry, and the recovery phase is all coming together. And let's acknowledge, the social justice movement and the civil unrest, all of these things coming together. The unique way that health, safety, consumer behavior, legislation, employee expectations, all these are just certainly unprecedented for all of us. And it's really incredibly complex. So to paint the picture, if you advance, Mary, I'd like to share with you some ways this complexity impacted CUNY Mutual, and you might be able to resonate with some of this. So these are just a sample of some of the statistics that you see on the screen here that demonstrate that just the scale of complexity from people to process to technology. Just even the sheer amount of change that's coming with new regulations and all great things to help our members and our customers. But it's a lot at once, and we don't have the luxury of time on some of these things to adapt. We did these things in weeks, and I'll be honest, previously, these things may have taken months. We handled work in volumes we would have never anticipated in staff for, and we moved talent internally within hours. So this really gets to the next slide of rapid change. So these are massive accomplishments, and to add to it, within 2 weeks, we had 2,000 additional people working remote. The vast majority of which we moved in 48 hours. And so we internally called this Project PJs, Project Get Out, really just to try to bring a little levity to a serious situation with a whole lot of work. And examples like this in the previous slide required us to be agile and lead in an agile way. And I'll talk more about what that means in a few slides. So I'm just curious if we pause for a second and you open up your chat. What did you experience as the hardest part of the recent pandemic? And we're going to ask you in the post, and Nicole's going to help me, and she put some options there. Was it the complexity of the changes? Was it the uncertainty of what was changing and or how long it would last? Or the rapid pace and the volume of change that was just hitting you? Or, hey, we're still in progress. We're figuring this out, which is a fine answer too. Where do you sit on that? So I'm seeing a couple B's, complexity, or actually uncertainty of what was changing. All of the above. Still in progress. Another uncertainty. If we had a polling chart, Nicole, I'd probably see a high bar on uncertainty on this. So thanks for that. I would agree. I think we've experienced all of those. I see as response and uncertainty at the beginning, trying to understand everything was like drinking from a fire hose. I hear you. And what we found just is, the impact of this on everybody was very different too, right? There wasn't just one solution you could use for everybody, which gets to that adaptability. So as you point out, the uncertainty of the situation combined with complexity and the need for rapid change is just unprecedented. So if you click to the next slide, this doesn't mean that we don't have a plan. Natural inclination is that we go back to our plan, but the important part, I would say, is that we adapt and we use what we're learning to make sure what we're doing still makes sense to do. And so as a company, for us, having agility, we treat as something that isn't optional. It's when problems are complex, you don't know the solution, you have a lot more assumptions you must test. And so with that, the ability to do this iteratively and quickly becomes crucial. So Ross, we found it helps to anchor to a few of these things that I'd like to share. So one, you'll hear in our walls, we talk about this a lot, I should say virtually now. Are we clear on the problem we're trying to solve or the opportunity? And so a lot of times we jump to solution of, hey, we should go do this. And we find that we're pushing back to say, and take a minute just to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Are we sure we understand the root cause before we take any action? The other important thing is state your assumptions of what you do and what you don't know. So a lot of times we find that we make a lot of implicit assumptions, and by making those explicit, stating what they are, it mitigates a lot of misunderstanding and helps us to stay focused. So that's a key one. Lastly, I would say is just test and learn, which means we build just enough to be able to get feedback, whether that be from your employees if it's something for them or your customers. Really just depends on what you're tackling. But really and that is a mindset shift that takes time and practice. So that's the theory part of it. Let me make this a little real for you and give you an example if we advance to the next slide. So recently, with the pandemic, we started to experience a number of issues with our offshore vendors and just their ability to work, right? This is a national problem. Additionally, our teams began working remotely. Their work conditions were different. They had distractions, stress from the situation, learning how to work remote. So time was of the essence for us. So initially we had to be very reactive. I think a lot of us did, right? And as a result of this, we redeployed over 100 people across our company to help out with constrained areas. And this is what we called phase one. And we had different phases of work because as we learned more, we were able to move from a reactive state to a more proactive state. And there were a lot of things we didn't know. And so we had to make some decisions quick based on certain assumptions. And by making those assumptions clear, it helped drive clarity in what we needed to solve for. This also helped the team narrow down how they could solve this problem, which drove accountability down to the team, which made them feel really purposeful and part of figuring this out. So when I say assumptions, some of the assumptions we included were one, we needed a temporary solution, which meant to start with an Excel spreadsheet was just fine. And we were seeing, as we were seeing capacity concerns in one area and we had available capacity in another part of the organization to help, we chose not to overbuild this, right? Because time was of the essence. Another assumption we made was that this was going to be voluntary. So we would ask people versus telling them they had to do it. Had we not been clear about that, it could have caused a whole lot of confusion, negative impact, and really slowed us down. As we moved forward, we revisited these assumptions and asked ourselves, do these assumptions still hold true? And we did this by getting feedback, asking those that were close to the work and the process on what was working and what was not, right? We didn't make assumptions of what we thought, we asked them. And what was interesting about this was we learned our assumptions changed. At the beginning of this, we said this was temporary. What we learned through the process was that this was incredibly impactful for those that were helping out other areas. They got to learn more about our customers. They're really able to develop the empathy through this really, really tough time. And they actually provided an outside in perspective on potential process improvements to those areas that they're helping, right? So they weren't close to it. They were able to give some really good insights of, hey, have you thought about this? So now what we're actually doing is we're looking at how we can do this ongoing. How can we provide this type of on-the-job learning and development in areas outside that you work in to get closer to the customer? Another important piece too is that we shared these learnings and communicated them across the company. So other areas could benefit from these learnings as well, even if it didn't impact them directly. And that's really what creates this learning culture and this test and learn mindset. So how can we all lean into these uncertain and complex, constantly changing times? There are a few things that we think are critical in thriving environments like this. So I'll advance to the next. I want to share a few strategies that we found to be pretty impactful on this journey. And yeah, Mary, want to go forward? I think next slide. And one more. There we go. Thanks. A few things I'm going to talk about is one is focus. Second one, iterate and learn mentality. And then I'll share how we as leaders show up by what we say, do, and even mess up. And how these things can really help us evolve the way we work to be more adaptable to our customers and to our employees. So let's start with focus. So we advance to the next. In this current environment, I feel like we've taken focus to a whole new level. So in this pandemic, our employees, right, they're juggling work, they're teachers, they're taking care of pets, parents. They're learning how to work remotely, and processes before that we've said, this has got to be done face to face. Well, we're challenging those assumptions and we're figuring out how to do them remotely. So while you look at this image, and this might be how it's working for some, but we also know that everyone is navigating this situation very differently, and it changes day by day. So if you transition to the next slide, we've all had different circumstances of what it might look like. So this picture actually in this photo is our VP of Human Resources. And I think this just goes to help visualize how it might look for others and just how incredibly hard this is to balance personal and work, and they're just melding together. It just really has varied. But I'll say, even if we can remember pre-pandemic, even before the pandemic, I beg to argue focus has been something that I think we can all say is really, really hard, and we're all challenged by it. The pace, the numerous methods of communication, there's never a shortage of good ideas to work on, and the needs of our customers are constantly changing at just unprecedented paces. And so the data shows that the impact of working on so much at once can lead up to losing a ton of productivity, and let alone peace of mind, right? I think we can all understand the more and more lists you have, the more and more complex it feels in your ability to just accomplish something. So an example of this really shined through for us during the pandemic. The environment forced us to be bold, and we had to move fast, and we needed focus. And so what we did as an enterprise, and this is something I've seen, and it was amazing to say, as an enterprise, we're going to do two things. We're going to ensure the health and safety of our employees and our customers and our community members. And secondly, we're going to create capacity to ensure we have those areas that are hurting, that they have support. And we had those filters across the enterprise. And so by doing this, it meant that we had to make trade-offs, and that was hard. And so just to give you a scale of what that meant. So we made the decision very quickly that we stopped 75% of our projects. So just to give you a sense of that, we had about 45 projects. We kept 9 going, and those 9 we kept going were only because they were compliance-driven regulations. We just needed to keep progressing those. And since then, what's interesting about the projects we've stopped, talk about the pace of change. There's actually 11 of those 45 we chose not to pick up again, because so much has changed in the environment in just the 3 months, 4 months that we've been in this, that we're like, hey, we need to pivot to these other things that we think we can make a greater impact. So at first, this was extremely hard for some. And I'll tell you, because these changes weren't impacting everybody the same. So we had some folks that didn't understand why they should stop, because they're fine. They were able to work remotely and didn't have distractions, and they were good. And we had others that weren't okay, and workload and overtime and all those things, right, were starting to hit in. So it was hard, emotionally, mentally, physically. But so what we did was we had to communicate a lot, and we had to keep sharing. These are our filters. This is why. This is how you can help, and continuous that communication of what we were doing over and over again. But what was interesting, what the results of this in a few days, that it really allowed us to ensure we protected what was most important to us, our people and our customers. And so, as you can see on this slide, not only were we able to respond fast, we were building, new capabilities for our customers, some of the things that we didn't have digitally, that we needed digitally to make that experience better. We focused on those. And not only did we get good results, but we also had positive results from our employees. We were hearing them, we were helping them, they understood what was most important. And it really helped us guide our next steps. So that's just an example. an extreme example of focus. And so what I'd like to ask you in the chat is, how did you help your employees try to focus? Did you reduce the number of projects? Did you have flexible schedules? Increase communication or pulse checking? Did you do more than one of these? Or do you have any other ideas that you did that we can all learn from that help provide focus? So if you could take a minute, love to see your ideas on how you help drive focus. Seeing one day off each week, back to those flexible schedules, all of these. Flexible schedules, yeah, I think that was a big one. Yeah, I think what we're seeing here too is very similar. I feel like we had to do a number of these things to really help the different scenarios that were happening for people. Help with communications. It was interesting. Our communications area was one that was so used to planning things out, what the schedule, from an enterprise perspective. And from an agility standpoint, this is one of the things we've talked about a lot of as a company. But as you start to experience it, you realize it. And after a while, they're like, yeah, I can't plan 3 days from now. We got to focus on what are the employees telling us and what should we communicate next. So just going back to sometimes agility and helping people to see, you have to experience it a little bit. Seeing flexible schedules, allow people to take time off as needed to care for home life and themselves. Yeah, that's great. So another important concept of agility that you'll hear a lot is test and learn. And having the ability to learn, build, measure, while keeping the customer and or employee insights, depending on what you're working on, really at the core of what you're doing. So the next strategy I want to share talks about problem solving or going after the next opportunity. And by having an iterate and learn mindset, kind of how that can help you work through that. So what does that really mean? Let's talk about that. So iterative, and I'm sorry, Mary, you can go to the next slide. So an iterative cross-functional collaboration to our work. That's really kind of what this is talking about. And with learning at the forefront. So if we think about the environment, and Mary, I don't know if you're having slide, but if you want to advance to the next one. Bear with us one. There we go. Thanks, Mary. If we think about the environment we're all in right now, and as we re-enter, we don't know what's going to happen. And so what we must take educated guesses. And so from there, what happens is we clarify and back to those, and we test those assumptions. So in a sense, we're kind of feeling our way through a dark room with each bit of feedback helping educate our next step, if you think about that analogy. So as you think about opening branches, you're measuring the risk and the outcomes to determine what to do next. And that's where that mindset becomes so critical of not only in the pandemic, but how we run our business so we can learn and drive data-driven outcomes at a pace we need to deliver for our customers. And that's what this is really all about. So how can leaders do this in a way that gives them a sense of stability, right? So it doesn't feel like you're just change on top of change. An example might be setting clear and consistent filters. Our employees knew what to expect of us during this pandemic, right? 1, protect the health and safety of our people, and 2, maintain business operations so that we can meet the needs of our customers. So to do this can be really hard sometimes, especially in an environment of unknowns. You may feel like this sense of loss of control a little bit and not want to try until you're sure. And we've been doing this for 4+ years now. I'll tell you, we still get challenged at that, of challenging ourselves, right? Of that, sometimes that fear of it, the more you know, the better you feel about making that decision, right? So another example for us is that during the last few months, we've stayed very close to our business metrics. And, all areas had this before, but we really took this opportunity as an enterprise to say, how do we make sure we have the data driven that we need to feel good about what's happening and being able to help those areas as we go back to conditions changing so much. So our employee experience created a workforce resiliency, a dashboard to help track physical, mental, emotional health, as well as engagement. And our business resiliency team set up, a robust business operations, this dashboard and SLAs and our customer facing metrics. So these helped us to quickly identify potential problems and adjust our approach and then measure again. So let's go help this area. Okay, did this have the impact that we thought it would make? So it was very kind of just part of our conversation, and we really had the right people at the table. I always say, when it comes to, there's the secret sauce sometimes of agility, some of the things we found is you have the right people, you have clear decisions, and you're having them communicate and talk, and you're testing and learning, and you're talking about that and using data. That's really kind of the secret sauce behind this mentality, and really starting to get comfortable with making these changes or decisions or whatever you're doing in a different way than you ever have before. So I'll go back to the chat feature again and ask you, have you had success when you think about your environment today and the mindset of being able to iterate and learn as you and making those assumptions clear? How have you done that in your organization? And so out there we've got haven't tried it yet, occasionally, all the time, or hey, this really hasn't worked for us as we've tried. So I'd love to hear from the group on what has helped you. And again, looking for, have you been able to use this kind of mindset of an iterate and learn mentality as you approach your work? And no wrong answer here. This will be good in the Q&A too, to go deeper. So I hear I haven't tried. Thank you. Be occasionally. As answers are coming in, yeah, be occasionally. I think as we started out with agility, one of the things we probably didn't spend as much time up front on this kind of mindset and this kind of importance of understanding how to look at your work differently. Because a lot of times, right, you want to build the whole thing. And so if you take a step back and say, what is the thing I want to learn here? What am I trying to test? What am I trying to understand? That's where this really starts to drive kind of a different dialogue. And it also helps your people, right? Sometimes they think, oh, I got this big thing. Well, what's the thing we want to go learn right now? And let's focus there. And let's not pretend we know 6 months from now what's going to happen. And let's take it doesn't mean you don't have a vision, doesn't mean you don't have a plan of where you want to head. It just says, hey, this is the one thing I'm going to learn that I think will help me get to that point. So great. Thanks for those who are participating. I'm seeing occasionally. So if we think about, we've talked about focus. We've talked about having an iterate and learn mindset mentality. The last thing I wanted to share was just around kind of as a leadership perspective and how you can lead through this. So if we advance to the next slide, I'll share with you a little bit about how this has helped us during this crisis response and through this time, and how it kind of lines up with the framework that we've kind of talked about so far. So kind of like to use this this framework of say it, do it, mess it up. So if you think about saying, and what I've talked to up to this point is we set clear guardrails. Hey, these are our filters. These are what we're going to use as a company. And I'll share with you, we're actually, as we're slowly starting to get back into, don't like to say business as usual because it doesn't feel like that will ever be the same, but we're still trying to apply like, hey, this was really good as an enterprise that we understood kind of what was most important. How do we carry that forward, not just in the pandemic, but going forward so that we get that alignment and we get that focus. Keeping employees engaged. We limited everything not connected to those filters. And we shared with our teams what they do is important, but how they do it is even more so important. And so employee safety meant wellness. We acknowledged an incredible amount of strain on the workforce and leaders with empathy and flexibility. I'll tell you, that's one of the biggest things we've gotten feedback is just that sense of some of the stuff that we've done really has shown that empathy and that vulnerability through a time that's really tough for everybody. So when we think of do it, this is where we empowered our crisis response team with a core team to really kind of own and kind of drive what we were going to do next. we didn't filter everything up to our executive team. They were aware and they knew, and we understood what filters or what was most important to them as we worked through this. So the communication was there, but we really empowered that next level down to make the call. And we were incredibly transparent about the decisions we were making and why. And that gave leaders the discretion and the power to make the best call for their employees as well. And really helped us to integrate continuous feedback as we were learning across the organization. So when we talk about mess it up, I think hopefully I can make this assumption with all of us. We probably all had some humbling moments over the last few months. When you're on that important phone call and your kid comes in the back door and you don't realize they're there and you're like, oh, what just happened? Or I literally had one of my coworkers, a little kid came in with their underwear. I mean, some of these moments you're like, at first you're like, but I think what we all quickly realized and learned, the value and impact it was to our team and our coworkers to see us all just being real in our own environments and being vulnerable. It really set an authentic tone. One, I'm glad that we discovered early in this process. And so we also learned from our mistakes, big and small. We spent an incredible amount of time talking about chairs at the beginning, office chairs, when we went back to the transition. And when we moved 2,000 people, right, going remote in 48 hours, we probably minimized the impact of that, right, on people's, ergonomics and all of that, right? So we quickly learned that, hey, people are asking about their chairs. We need to let them go get their chair, So those are the things where as you're kind of mining through all these different things, you can fix and you can change and you get that feedback and you don't wait 6 months for a pulse survey to understand, right, what's going on. And so those are some of the things that I think have really helped us, one, not just be authentic, but two, people see that we're taking feedback, we're learning, and we're making change. I'd also add, you'll likely have employees that not only have opinions, but also have really creative ideas on how to help you in this challenge and what's to come. And so asking them what they think, inviting them to the problem and the solution. For us, there really wasn't a playbook. It was just, hey, we couldn't be creative. We wanted to be creative. We wanted to, bring people into helping us get to the next step. So the unknown for us, right, can be scary. It's especially for those that, as you think about Agile, a lot of us take pride in knowing kind of the answer. And this kind of flips that upside down a little bit and really understanding and being clear as leaders on the what and letting your teams figure out the how. And so that's a fundamental shift versus having this ready to bake solution that we're ready to go. We're learning through what's most important. Because again, back to change, our customers, their needs are constantly changing, and we don't know 6 months right now what the needs are going to be, especially in the current environment we live in today. So a lot of ambiguity. So a few suggestions that we continue to help leaders in our organization in many different ways and tactics that we're doing is one, just stressing the importance of being situationally adaptive. There's no one framework that you can plop on an organization, especially when it comes to agility, and say, do these things and you'll be agile. It takes the work and says, hey, what do I need to do now for my current environment? How do I take concepts? How do you take concepts that I shared today and integrate those into your environment and learn and see how they might work? So that's really important, as being situationally adaptive. Honoring multiple perspectives. That's the great thing about this, is you get the right people focused on a problem with multiple perspectives. You'd be amazed how quickly you can get something done, the quality, because you've given them focus and you've given them the right people to kind of solve this problem. Giving and receiving feedback is another key one, because if you don't, right, you don't know what you're testing and learning, if it's having the impact or the outcomes that you want. So really having a culture that you can give and receive feedback is easier said than done. I'd say another one is being present and available. So we use this term, and it's interesting in a virtual environment how you do this, but I always use the term go to the work. So rather than your people always coming to you and giving you updates, and how do you go to the work and help support them in such a way where you can where it doesn't create extra layers and work for them, and it really shows them that you care and that you're interested and that you want to help. Another one that we focus on a lot is how do you become outcome oriented, because a lot of times we focus on a lot of the stuff we do and the tasks, but what is the true outcome I'm trying to achieve? And if we're clear on that, then I probably care less about the how you get there, as long as we're anchored to the outcome we're looking for is this. There's probably many different ways we can get to that outcome. You are the smart person. Go help me figure that out. So kind of making that shift. And with that, right, it really encourages data-driven decisions, because rather than being anecdotal or thinking, I feel this is the right thing to do, kind of what has your customer said? What data are you using to help support that? What assumptions have you made? Right? So really trying to drive that mindset as you're working on different things. So shared a few different things. Hopefully today you found some of these strategies helpful. Back to focusing, iterate and learn, kind of having the mindset and supporting your teams by what you say, do, and even mess up as leaders, it becomes super critical when trying to create an environment that can be agile. So I want to stop there because I would love to open up for some questions from everybody on anything that we've discussed today, or if there's another topic around Agile that you're curious about, happy to address that. So I think we're going to open up, Nicole, and for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and I hope we're not getting too much feedback. It sounds okay on my end. What great information you've provided, and appreciate your time today. I do want to let folks that are calling in know that if you would like to unmute yourself, again, we're all muted. So it's *6 if you would like to make a comment, ask Tammy a question, and then please feel free to use the chat box as well. So I know when we were planning with Tammy, she really wanted this to be interactive, and so she's here for you. We've got about 17 more minutes, and so please, anybody, feel free to jump in. Anybody on the call, *6 should unmute you.
Nicole, while folks are thinking, I can share one thing that I get a question a lot around is just how have you gone about teaching or helping your organization to think differently in an agile way, right? So today we didn't even go through, right, a lot of the mechanics of agile, which is a whole, right, probably separate presentation. But I'd say the short answer is it takes time and multiple approaches to doing this. So from our story, we started super small. We started, but impactful. So I think that's important, not just starting a small that you don't feel like it was super low risk that you can't, right? Because you want to be able to show the benefits of how this can help your organization. So we started small, we learned, and then we expanded. And 4 years later, we're still, we're about roughly 3,000 folks, and we're still constantly like helping the organization kind of understand what it means to be agile and not just do agile. Because sometimes you find, right, that you're going through the mechanics and you forget why you're doing this. So we've, over the last, 12 to 18 months, have spent a ton of time working across all levels of the organization. Starting up, I think one of the things that we had, I feel very thankful for as an organization, is that we had the support from our CEO down. Because when you think about agile and having like the changes that you want to make, some of these changes are really systemic, and they require changing processes that you may have had for a long time, and they require cross-functional groups getting together to say, hey, how do we want to do this differently? So really having that top-down support, and being open to sharing your learnings across the organization. We also invested, right? My team spends a lot of time coaching, training, helping our enterprise in many different ways, whether it be support on projects or just working with HR and different competencies that we want to drive across the organization. So I think when you think about, right, truly being a customer-centric, member-centric organization, right, it's really making sure that to do that, their needs are changing so fast. And that's why I go back to agile or agility really isn't an option. It's either it's going to happen, right? So the change. So how can you best help your people and your whole community right across your organization understand the importance of why you want to do this, because it takes work, but also just connecting to those learnings so they can see the benefits happening. So when we did this small, we saw benefits. I mean, we went from delivering products that took us 2 years to getting something to market online in 3 months. I mean, so you talk about, right, we didn't have this, it's not the same thing that we delivered, but imagine, right, we found that we deliver projects 2 years and the need was already gone, and it changed so much that, what we were ready to deliver didn't really meet their needs. So really kind of thinking about that in your organization is just how important this is. It's such a key enabler, I think, to a lot of our strategies to move faster. But to do that, it's not just telling your people, okay, we need to move. It's changing the mindset and helping them, because it takes a certain level of resilience. I think about the pandemic we're in right now, right? You can imagine, the resilience it's taking all of us, right? One day your employee's fine, the next day they're not, the next day they're fine, and so just how do you navigate through that? It's building muscles. And so we spend a lot of time talking about personal agility, which means there's a certain level of resilience that we're building up within our team, to not just think of, oh, this is just an event I'm working towards, to a culture that's no, we just constantly change and we adapt and we learn and we align. And so I think that is some of the hard work that's done. But short answer is it takes time, and it takes support and training and coaching and just focus to make this a priority for your organization.
Well, and Tammy, thank you to you and the leadership at CUNA Mutual for being able to pivot so quickly. When you said that you had to transition 2,000 people to working from home, we only have 15 at the Virginia League, and I know our credit unions have, a variety of number of employees, and I know that they dealt with it. But to hear you guys, and from our end, I feel like you all never missed a beat. And I personally have met so many more people with CUNA Mutual and other organizations that we partner with. And so there's been kind of a silver lining that it's actually made us connect with more people. So we certainly appreciate everything that you're doing on behalf of the credit unions. And so if, I'll turn it back over. If anybody has any great stories to share, or any more questions for Tammy. Well, I'm gonna, I think Mary just wanted to give you all a few more dates of some of our upcoming events. Tammy, we have recorded this, so we'll send this out to everyone, and Mary's gonna unmute herself, and I'm gonna put myself on and turn it over to Mary.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Everyone can hear me? Good? Okay, good. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. As Nicole said, I wanted to plug just a few events we have upcoming here from the League. We have 2 virtual CEO peer discussion events that we're going to host August the 3rd. That's upcoming this Monday. And it's going to be pretty much open discussion, but we definitely want to discuss how your credit union is responding to so many school districts opting for virtual learning for fall 2020, and what that means for staffing at your credit union. So hopefully you'll be able to jump on those calls and participate. We're also hosting a webinar on August the 5th at 2 p.m. with our partners at Woods Rogers. They are going to provide an overview of the final version of Virginia's COVID-19 workplace safety standards that will be effective, I believe, next week. So you can visit vacuo.org for registration details on both of those events. We also have many more great sessions lined up for this Shift Happens series, so we hope you plan to join us. Details on all of those can be found at vacuo.org/shift. Thanks again to Tammy and CUNA Mutual Group. We appreciate you guys. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care.